Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Ellie Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome Yakov.
Hi, nice to be here.
I'm sitting here again with Yakov Kirsh, still the founder of Conscious Judaism. So now I'm a listener.
Yes.
When we met, I've heard of it, but our conversation moved me, so it's good. How was it the first time we had a discussion? Anything change in your life as a result?
Well, I got some feedback. Mostly people were excited to hear that there's another side to things that maybe they haven't noticed. And in my personal life, I'm always changing a lot, so not the same guy anymore. 12 months is a full cycle.
Right, I don't think I am either.
Yeah. So everything gets digested, and then the future comes as a result. So I'm sure that whatever became of me was different because of a conversation that I had, especially a meaningful one.
Right. Yes, I got a lot of feedback at the time. People were very moved by it and asked, those who didn't read the YouTube notes, asked, where can we find this guy? How can we hear him more? So I sent, if I can make one recommendation, the better the audio is, I think the more people.
Right. So, it will be easier for the
be more easier for the listener.
Absolutely.
So it's a worthwhile investment.
Yes.
But there was a couple people asked me this question, and interestingly enough, even when we were chatting just before, it didn't pop into my head, it just entered my head now, was that when you were going through for lack of a better word, the history of Judaism, you kind of stopped at the Baal Shem Tov.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously a lot of my followers are Chabad. I grew up Chabad. So what's your view on Chabad, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, his view of the world, his impact on the world? Where does that fit into your
I'm not
your
an
worldview?
expert. My father, when I was born, was going through a Chabad phase. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely have a relationship with Chabad. My name was almost Shner Zalman. At the last minute, it became something else. So there's something there. And later on, when I was a teenager, in my late teens, I very much connected to the Baal Tanya, and I got really into it. And that was sort of I think it was my basic philosophy of how I interacted with Judaism and with life was from the Baal Tanya's perspective, as far as what I understood it to be. But this later evolved. Today, the way that I see it is that the Baal Shem Tov was a representative of the Zohar. The Zohar is the representative of what does it mean to have a Torah, because without the Zohar, the Torah is not really that meaningful. It might tell you what to do, but it can't really connect you to your soul, which is the goal of what it's trying to accomplish. And so, at best, it would be a perfectly programmed robot, but it cannot be a human being. A human being must be alive. He must be beyond the books that he's read. He must be something that is there present. And so Reb Shimon Bar Yochai brings it down, the Arizal brings it down, the Baal Shem Tov brings it down, and then come a lot of offshoots from the Baal Shem Tov. So I don't see Chabad specifically as something that's expressing the original Baal Shem Tov. It's something that was custom designed for a certain project, for a certain perspective. And so to the others, like Breslev and just like Vizhnitz.
Do you feel like it's moving away from the Baal Shem Tov in some way?
I feel like it's narrowing it down to something more logical. The Baal Shem Tov is more emotional, and the Chabad movement is more logical, more connected to the mind, like the Moach Shalit al Halev thing, versus the Baal Shem Tov, which is, the Moach is so in love with the Lev that they just work together. There isn't that distinction in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tovs. And this is an example of this teaching where Chabad sort of veers away from the Baal Shem Tov, is the Baal Shem Tov's instruction about halos amidos. Halos amidos means that if a person encounters any type of attraction or fear in the external world, he should try to figure out what is the essence, the soul of that experience, and bring that soul back to its origin. Save it from the external expression and bring it back to what it really means. So, for example, on a basic level, A person is afraid of something. There's war, there are enemies, there's whatever. And that fear causes him to now shrink. Now the whole world is no longer the Ein Sof, the original one that is described by the name, by the holy name. Now suddenly there are other factors that are influencing reality that he is now concerned about. Or if he's attracted to something that in his view or understanding is not really good for him. And so then again, there's no longer the unity. There is something else now that's playing a game with this unity. So the Baal Shem Tov's advice is find the soul and connect that back to its root. And so what is essentially what we should be afraid of? We should be afraid of violating our design. That's the only fear we should have. If we never violated our design, we have his guarantee that we're going to be safe and we're going to be rewarded and things are going to work out wonderful. The moment we violate his design, no matter for what reason, then suddenly we have a personal conflict with reality at large.
But what would be an example of elevating that fear?
And so the example is you take it back to the fear that is the essence of fear, which is the real fear, which is I don't want to go against my design. And so if being afraid of something external is against my design, now is not the time for that. I'm not available. And so you bring it back to its original source. The same thing with anything you're attracted to. You want something, what do you want? You want the revelation of your own soul. This is what you want. You think, if I have this, my soul will reveal itself more, I will feel closer to life itself, and I will be more attached to the divine. If that's accurate, then that's a healthy desire. If it's inaccurate, then this desire is now taking you away from that love. Elevating the spark would mean remember what you really love. Don't get confused by what your senses are telling you, and realize what it is you're really searching for.
And so, you feel like Chabad disagrees with this?
Oh, the Baal Tanya states clearly that a person shouldn't be a fool and try to apply this method, which is the method of the Baal Shem Tov.
Right. I think he says, how can you elevate something if you're beneath it?
It's basically saying the animal soul awoke. She is now in charge, and she told you you're attracted to something. You're going to now try to argue with an animal. That's essentially his message. And the Baal Shem Tov has that view, obviously. And so I think the Baal Tanya was more in touch with his people. He was more grounded. He was more here. He was speaking from a practical perspective. The Baal Shem Tov was more on the other side. He was more beyond than here. And so in that sense, the instruction is different. And the same goes for all the offshoots. They have their own flavor where they're different. I just chose this as an example. Yeah? And obviously Chabad is based on the Zohar, based on the Arizal, based on the Baal Shem Tov. It's a wonderful source of Chassidus, but it's not the original flavor, it's a specific flavor. All the Chassidus that came from the Baal Shem Tov are a different flavor, a different variation of that same original light. And so it's different lenses based on the practical application of this teaching.
When we sat the first time, it seemed you were saying that many in Judaism have gotten it wrong, and there were a few, the Zohar, the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, which got it right.
Right.
But I'm not hearing in what you're saying whether you feel Chabad got it wrong or got it right.
So I don't think it's that black and white. I think that there are people that get it wrong, which means that they're offending the message and they're causing harm. There are people that get it right, which means they see the entire big picture. And then there are people in the middle. And nobody gets it right all the way. This is what it means. No one ever saw. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't see. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't understand the plan over here. Moshe Rabbeinu was very good at being what he was, and he knew how to be the most of what he was. But we sort of come from this Greek philosophical mindset where we are in charge over here, and therefore we naturally should know what's going on. But the mindset before the Greeks, no one thought that way. Like in the time when people were idol worshipping, it meant they didn't feel they're in charge of anything. They realized that there are bigger forces at play, and they were trying to kiss up to those forces in whichever way possible to feel safe.
Right.
And so our assumption that we can know what's going on is very small-minded. This is a very big development that is happening who knows how long and who knows over what expanse of space and time. And it's not within our capacity to see the big picture, not even for the prophets. The prophets could see the small picture. What's the small picture? What's happening now, the context of it. What is it going to lead to? But then that's within a bigger context, and even that is within a bigger context. And these things no one knew. No one ever even assumed that it's possible to know. And so when we speak about people and their greatness, the greatness is not going to be measured by them knowing the truth. They didn't know the truth. But how much of the truth did they know? How dangerous is their teaching? Or how much can it save your soul? And then how much were they dedicated to that truth? If we look at the language of the pasuk, it says, "V'tzadik be'emunasa yichya," the righteous one lives with his belief. And so there are many ways of playing with these words, but the basic understanding that it's teaching us is that a righteous one is not one who knows the right beliefs. This is beyond the righteous one. A righteous one is one who is authentic and honest with his beliefs, and he really lives according to them. And when he can't live according to them, he questions his actions and his motivations, but at the same time, he also questions his beliefs. And so
meaning everything is integrated, everything is
when the
cohesive.
beliefs meet with the behaviors and the expressions, then we have a tzaddik. But this tzaddik, he might not be a chacham. He might not
many
really
of us
know.
don't do exactly what we believe.
Most of us don't. But the righteous ones do. And yet they're righteous and they're big, and yet they don't know what's happening.
But they're not absolute.
They don't know what's happening here. They don't
Even your
understand the
namesake,
context.
it says about Yaakov, he didn't know the end of days, which means he didn't have the full
He
picture.
couldn't reveal it, right? He couldn't reveal it to the Shvatim, Shiftei Yod. They were such wonderful, great people. We would all say that they were the real deal, and yet we would also say that, no, they didn't see the big picture. They didn't understand the truth. They didn't understand why it's so important, for example, that Yehuda and Yosef should get along for the sake of everyone else. And because of that, later we have a split in Judaism where Shlomo HaMelech is the king, undisputed. His son is already disputed. And this is still coming back from Yehuda, which leads to Shlomo HaMelech and Rechavam, and Yosef, which leads to Yeravam. And so because these two forces can't get along, everywhere in nature these two forces can't get along.
You're saying their descendants also.
This is still the problem. It says in the pasuk when Mashiach will come, Ephraim lo yikanes Yehuda veYehuda lo yotzer es Ephraim.
Which means?
Which means that Yosef will no longer be jealous of Yehuda that he's the king, and Yehuda will no longer make Yosef small. They will learn how to make each other feel big and important and give the space to each one so that we have a united unity. The unity is the goal of the entire process. And so the exile means certain forces are not cooperating with the unity and therefore they've been exiled. And so now we can't interact with these forces in a direct way. This is what it means that the 10 tribes were lost. It means that certain body parts, certain functions within us are lost. We don't understand how to interact with them.
Right, the disunity is internal.
Disunity is everywhere in nature, which is what creates the internal. Right? The big man and the small man, the microcosm and the macrocosm,
Right.
It's everything. This is what we have in our body is the map of everything. And so whatever is happening anywhere is also happening in our bodies.
So I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, just because I grew up with this idea a lot of Ma'ich Shalat al Halev, and it was something repeated to us
Yes.
hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Yes.
At times in yeshiva. So what is were you saying that what the Baal Shem Tov was saying is specifically contrary to that?
I found in my own life, following that advice, that it led me to emotional repression. And it meant that I wasn't getting the full feedback from life that life was trying to tell me because my mind was already so made up about what needs to happen that it didn't matter what my heart had to say about it. And later I paid a lot for that.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's why I heard Ma'ich Shalat al Halev for a long time, right? This idea of the mind controls the heart so emotions can kind of be buried. And recently there was a book published called Letters of Life or Letters for Life by Levi Shmatkin. And what he did is he analyzed the number of Rebbe letters and kind of painted a picture in his own words of the Rebbe's philosophy on mental health and emotional health. Beautifully written book. And in it, he quoted just a short letter about Ma'ashalat al-Lev, where the Rebbe was writing to someone about it. And he said there's two parts to it. One is that the mind, when you say Ma'ashalat al-Lev, one is that the mind controls the heart. And the other is that the heart is there. Because otherwise there'd be nothing to control. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, I never heard that before.
It wasn't expressed.
It wasn't right. It wasn't expressed.
So that's what it is, that the message, getting a message across is not the same when you're reading something as when you're seeing something. So if you interact with a person, I'm sure the Baal Tanya had a huge lave and it was fully alive. It was there. If you saw him, this would wake up your heart. But reading his words, you can walk away with an intellectual experience. And the Baal Shem Tov was more towards the experiential. It was more about how much do you feel the difference in the reality of your soul after the wisdom. And so if I tell you the explanation of all the worlds and I give you a tremendous download of real accurate information about reality, the question is not how much of it are you going to remember. The question is, did something in your heart move?
How's it going to change?
Are you different now?
Yes.
This is the goal of the wisdom. And I think actually I saw this in the Baal Tanya said this in the name of the Baal Shem Tov. He said that the Magi told him that the Baal Shem Tov did not teach all the wisdom and the Kabbalah that he taught in order to make people smarter. The only reason he did it was to heal them emotionally.
Is that right?
This was his goal. Yeah.
Where does it say this?
I don't know, but I remember it in the name of the Baal Tanya that he heard it from his teacher. That the goal was that the midas should change, the heart should change. They should feel differently about life. And so in order to get there, we have to speak the deeper wisdom, because when we look at life at the face value of it, it's offensive. It closes the heart, it intimidates. And so then we don't have who we can talk to. We don't have the organ that's sensitive enough to appreciate what we have to tell it. But the goal of a healed heart is the wisdom that can live in it. Because a heart that's offended by life cannot contain the truth. The truth is difficult. And so only one who very much loves life can contain this truth. Someone who doesn't like life doesn't want to know this truth. It's a burden on him. Even though in the greater picture, it's the biggest relief. But in the immediate picture, it's the highest burden.
You're saying the truth is the biggest relief.
Of course, in the greater picture of things, after everything will be resolved. When we know who we are, then we know, first of all, that everything that happens here shouldn't be happening. And so then we're very much relieved. But we're here and it's happening. That's not pleasant once you know that it shouldn't be happening. That becomes even harder to carry, especially when you know how much it shouldn't be happening and how much damage is being caused by the fact that it is happening.
So let's go into this, because I've read a lot of the most popular meditation books and books on healing in the U.S. A lot of them come from Buddhist teachers, Buddhist ideas, and Buddhist ways.
Right.
And there's a lot of beautiful messages in that part of life. And then you have Judaism, which has a very different lens.
Perspective, yes.
It's certainly different, right? A very, very different perspective. But a lot of it, I didn't appreciate the subtleties and the sensitivities within Judaism until I read it in Buddhism.
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
And I don't say I read it in Buddhism, but I read it like teachers like Michael Singer, teachers like Joseph Goldstein, and others.
It's coming from that same well.
Certainly, but there does seem to be there does seem to be one pretty significant variance, and you're touching on that a little bit, where it seems to me amongst the Buddhist philosophies is don't touch. Right? Don't touch the world. Everything is as it's meant to be. But what you're saying is something about it being not the way it's supposed to be, and understanding. So how do you separate between what is and what isn't the way it's supposed to be? Because Judaism definitely believes to touch.
Yes.
Right? We're supposed to mess with it.
I look at it this way. The Buddhists try to heal you by telling you everything is fine, nothing matters. Judaism tries to heal you by telling you you better show up. Everything matters. And so one is trying to relieve the pressure on your nervous system. The other one is trying to build enough motivation to carry a broken nervous system. It's not trying to heal you. It's trying to heal the world through you.
Right.
It's a very different message.
Very different, yeah.
Yes, it's firing you up. Buddhism is like calm waters, and Judaism is like a raving fire. You know, when it would touch someone, when the Kabbalah would enter someone's heart, they would become like a living fire. People would go get warm next to them, spiritually.
Right. I guess both can heal. Both can heal you.
It's different. It depends what you're trying to heal. There are levels within the soul that Buddhism cannot heal.
Go ahead.
Because Judaism is much more ancient. If you want something that can potentially compete with Judaism, even though it can't, from my perspective, but something that gets close would be Hinduism. And Hinduism is idols, but Judaism came at a time of idol worship. Judaism is closely related to idol worship, except it says, don't worship the idols, worship the one who created the idols. So we call him Eleheu Elohim, the God of the gods. We worship the God of the gods, but knowing the gods gives you context for the God of the gods. Not knowing the gods, thinking logically, being intellectual, or even in Buddhism where you're worshipping the essence of things, but without a proper language to really approach him. You're just doing it through reality, not through language. So
what do you mean by that? Doing it through reality and not through language?
By the Buddhist meditations are trying to bring you to the silence that is holding the space for everything.
Right.
And this is the feminine aspect of the divine. The feminine aspect of the divine is the receptive aspect, meaning there's like a canvas, a space, upon which all of reality is going to play out. And so Buddhism takes you to that canvas, to that space, to the silence that's behind the movement. Judaism says God is the silence, but God is also the movement. I don't want to go back to the silence because I myself am the movement. I want to know the movement. What is the right movement? How do I move along with this and I don't ruin it or cause destruction or damage? And so the movement is related to organs and body parts. This is what's doing the movement, but not just in man, but in the astrological order. In the signs, in the planets, they're all related to the organs. Like if you look at these palmistry books or the face reading books, they're all going to tell you here is Venus and here is Mars and here is Jupiter, because the language of the body and the language of the stars are the same. Whether they know how to interpret or not, this is the ancient tradition.
Right, it's there.
This was known in all the ancient cultures. And this is where idol worship comes from. And so essentially, if there's a body part that I like to please, and on account of that, I cause destruction to other body parts, this is, in essence, idol worship. This is called Ovid Kechov Mimazolis. He's worshipping stars.
Say more.
And astrological signs. He's worshipping the planets. He's worshipping the forces that are animating him and not the one intelligence that's running them.
If someone is more responsive to some of his needs than others, you're saying?
Yes, if he neglects any needs on account of other needs, then he is worshipping parts of himself which are run by the Kechovim and the Mazalis, and he's not living in the unity. So eventually this is going to turn against him.
Fascinating. So you're saying that aspect of it, someone who's seeing the world, recognizing all of the forces that are, is in some ways closer to Judaism, even though it could.
The idols are,
even though it's the one that contradicts Judaism more than any other.
The language of the Torah is to people who come out of Egypt, and Egypt was the ultimate culture of idol worship. They knew all the idols. Paro had a book of every single possible idol, right?
Right. In some ways, that was the war. Whose God is bigger?
Yeah. Whose God is bigger? Meaning,
between Moshe and Paro.
Do you know the forces, and do you know how to use them in your favor? And Paro was the biggest one. And these were spiritual forces. This wasn't just physical forces. They had techniques of going beyond the physical. They were a very spiritual culture, but they were contaminated in the sense that the moment you're not worshiping the unity, there's a concept of self that separates from the collective. And that concept is essentially what becomes the idol. The ultimate problem with the idol worshipper is not that he's worshiping Mars. It's that who decided that he worships Mars and not Venus?
Him.
The small self. This is the problem. That's what he's worshiping essentially.
So how does one know if they're engaging in idol worship? On this level, meaning the more subtle interpretation of idol worship.
If they observe,
one need versus the other
if they
needs.
observe their problems in life, they will see what is causing this shortage. What don't they have that other people have? Why do they have a certain problem? And if the problem is lack of wisdom, then they're not idol worshippers. If the problem is anything else, then something here is being sacrificed for something else, and therefore they're not getting the balance that they're supposed to get.
So if someone believes they have lack of health or lack of a good relationship or lack of money,
these things are always going to be the result of some type of a neglect. Either there are some people that are not meant to have money. And so for them, not to idol worship would be to make peace with that fact and to know that, this is how I need to live my life, at least for now. It could be in the future it will change. But the moment that something is now, and you're saying that it's supposed to be something else, either it's supposed to be something else because that's the way the big self wants, the one who created it, or you're just getting in the way of things.
So how does someone know again?
So they observe
What's
their
the
life.
litmus test?
They observe their life and they see how are their problems in life. What do they see as problems? Why? Because when you have a problem, it means you're offending your heart. But your mind concluded something that's offensive to your heart. Your heart says, this I don't like. Your mind says, but this is how it is. Now we have to observe, is this really how it is, or did you decide that this is how it is?
So how does one know? Let's say you have a parent who has a couple of children who are not as Torah observant as they want them to be, as they would like them to be.
Yes.
How do they know if that's idol worship or that's offensive to God also and not part of the bigger design?
The first observation needs to be on the person themselves, because usually what's happening around us is because we've been idol worshipping, and therefore we're not giving the right instructions to the environment. And so they didn't see the sweetness of what it is that we were doing. They didn't see the real authenticity or dedication or whatever it might be. Otherwise, they would want in. The world is a place where we go after what's most safe, what's most attractive, what's most enjoyable. And so if we are authentically serving a higher purpose, this would be something that people around us would want to imitate or would want to learn how to do, because this gives a bigger context to life. This gives us some type of satisfaction. And so we look at ourselves and we try to observe, what does this relationship with God that I claim to have really mean to me before I try enforcing it on the environment? What is it? What is the real essence of things here? Why do I believe what I believe? How do I know that the way that I believe it is the way for it to be believed? And so today it's not possible to find someone who's not idol worshiping. If someone is constantly in search of wisdom and that's all he's searching for, I'm not talking about learning. He could be learning Gemara all day. That's still idol worship, because he's denying his nature. His nature is, his soul says, I need to understand what I'm doing or I will be very afraid that I'm in big trouble. This is the nature of the soul. He's denying that nature. Why is he denying it? He doesn't feel safe.
How do you know he's denying it?
Because he's not searching for wisdom.
He's just searching for knowledge.
He's searching for whatever it is they told him. He's not listening to his soul. His soul wants to understand. His soul wants to know what this is all about. His soul is not ready to settle. As a child, they made him settle. And then he forgot. And so that's not a soul anymore. The soul is the one who's constantly questioning. If he is searching for wisdom, and in the meantime he's surviving, he's doing whatever, then there's a chance he's not idol worshipping. If he's not in constant search of wisdom, he's for sure idol worshipping. He sold his soul for something, for a sense of safety, for a sense of belonging, for a sense of community, for a sense of whatever. But it's not the real deal. The soul doesn't buy it. The soul wants to know. And the soul is thirsty to know. And this is what the secret wisdom is all about. If the soul is thirsty enough, you don't need any books. You don't need any secret wisdom. You don't need anything.
What do you need?
Whatever it is that's driving that soul is going to teach it everything it needs to know. But because we don't have this thirst, because we don't have our soul, because the nations have made us forget who we really are and what our essence is all about through so much suffering, we need all the books to awaken our desire, but not for the actual wisdom. The pasuk says, "Ki Hashem yiten chochma," because the divine gives wisdom. Mipiv das is vina. From his mouth you get knowledge and understanding. Meaning, the words that I'm saying to you, what do they mean to you? They will not mean the same thing to anyone else. So who told you what I told you now?
Right.
It wasn't me. You see, I gave a vessel to the body, but the soul responded with meaning. And so when one has enough desire, the force that gives wisdom will reveal itself to him. But when one doesn't have desire, he needs all the books in the world to awaken him to ask the right questions and to do the right search.
So what of all the specific instructions that a lot of these books have in terms of how to pray and use tefillin and Shabbos and kosher, like all the instructions
Right.
that are involved there? If we're just in search of wisdom and we can access that by ourselves, if not for all the noise, then why do we need these books of instruction?
And so, once we deteriorated and we became ignorant, we no longer have this natural drive. The soul gets disconnected at a very young age. We get told, don't ask, there aren't any real answers, do this, do that, or just plain distracted by whatever it might be, and then we forget to ask as we grow. So now our body is getting training that is in contradiction to its natural state. It's now getting its instructions from external sources, and it doesn't sit well. It doesn't really get digested properly. And so it's doing things externally. This is called chitzonius, right?
Right.
And so when you get into that state of chitzonius, it means now the soul no longer can talk to this person. There's so many external things that are occupying him. There's no longer any room for the internal. And the other nations would want to do that to us. This was one of the ancient forms of warfare. They did spiritual warfare. So it was about breaking the character, breaking the personality, making you forget what you're about, traumatizing until that person can no longer properly function. All these were part of the manipulations. And so if we're going to be manipulated by others through suffering or through threat, and we can no longer remember our soul, how are we ever going to remember? How are we ever going to awaken and realize that something is wrong? We're going to realize it's wrong because it doesn't feel right and we feel abused, but we're going to think all that's necessary is for us not to be abused, and then we'll be fine. We won't realize that, no, this is not life at all. This is something else.
So you're saying it's for this that instruction comes along, but it's still a deviation.
And so first we need to keep this alive. Second, we need to keep the people alive while they don't know. And third, we need to give messages that will allow the soul to awaken from within these rituals, from within these commandments. And so the commandments are filled with wisdom. This is what the Zohar is all about, especially the Rai Mehemne. The Rai Mehemne, which is Rabbi Shimon channeling Moshe Rabbeinu, is about the explanation of the mitzvahs. What do they really mean? And how do they all relate back to what's happening here and now? Because if they're not happening here and now, they're not happening anywhere.
Meaning,
we're giving you instruction. You are here now. And so if your Judaism is what happened while Moshe Rabbeinu was alive, or your Judaism is about what will happen after Mashiach comes, then
it's not relevant to now.
Then there's no one here.
Right.
We'll lean on that if we have to, but that's not the goal. The goal is that here and now, there should be a realization. And so the mitzvahs have information that's relevant here and now. This is the essence of the mitzvah.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that because we've disconnected so much from ourselves, so we need this incredible amount of instruction. But the instruction at best is a body without a soul. And then it's our job to, as much as possible, extract the soul and the spirit from the instructions that we have.
If we had soul, we would be searching for that soul. Because we've forgotten our soul, we assume that these also don't have soul.
But you're saying if we had soul, if
Yes.
we're connected to that, then obviously we have it. But if we're connected to it intimately, then naturally we would be drawn to whatever
To the soul
it is
in
that
everything,
right?
including the soul of the world, which is called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We would live on the level of soul. And you know where we realize this difference, which is why the world has become so chaotic, is that when we live on a body level, we're attracted to bodies. When we live on a soul level, we're attracted to soul. Now, what happens when we're attracted to bodies is corruption. People get what they don't deserve. When we live on a soul level, everyone gets what they deserve. Those who are pleasant on the level of soul have a lot of friends. Those who are pleasant on the level of soul have a lot of power. Those who are pleasant on the level of soul have direction for the collective. But when we are on a body level, those who are attractive on the body level have more money, more power, more. Those who happen to already have more money and power, and therefore on the body level they are more in command. Now they have even more power to give to themselves. And so corruption happens as a result of living without soul. Because the body is not measured according to the soul. The body doesn't have room for those dimensions. Those are much more subtle dimensions. And so only when we're alive on the level of soul can we be accurate to reality. As soon as we lose our soul, we lose access to life. We lose the ability to discern right from wrong. We lose the ability to know how to judge character, know who to connect with, to understand the importance of the people that we associate with, the people we empower, the people we give to, the people we interact with and do business with. So all these things, they become corrupt as there's lack of soul. And so religion is about awakening soul. This is the only goal it has. Teres Hashem Tmima, the teaching is complete. Why? Because Meshivas Nefesh, it has the power to restore your soul.
But you're also saying that there are not many people not many, if any people, that have accessed this, right? Like, I mean, we're all missing the mark.
Again, it's not black and white. This is all relative. In the ancient times, there were millions of people who lived by their soul. This was normal. There were corrupt people who lived by the body, but
When you say ancient times, how far back are you going?
If we want to talk about millions of people, we're talking the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Then it went down to hundreds of thousands, and then to tens of thousands, and then to thousands, and then to hundreds, and then to tens, and then to individuals rarely.
Which is so you feel like we're moving further away.
Of course, this is darkness. This is as dark as it's ever been.
Really?
Yes.
Where as dark as it's ever been? Because a lot of people feel, let's say, that today is more light than it was 100 years ago. You're saying no. You're saying it's...
No, this is as dark as it's ever been because our organs, our vessels have been deteriorating consistently. There hasn't been any relief whatsoever. So on the external level, we might say we're more comfortable. Internally, we're less comfortable. And this can be measured by what people can suffer and still be okay. That's gone down dramatically.
Say that again?
What people can suffer.
What do you mean by that?
How big of a calamity needs to happen to someone before he gets destabilized and he's like, get me out of here, I can't do this anymore.
So you're saying now people need more?
People are very weak, very fragile.
Oh, in that way?
Yes.
Okay.
But this is exactly what's been deteriorating.
Because I feel like people aren't so fragile in the sense, meaning I'll give you, so sometimes I watch people and to me their lives are in total
miserable.
chaos.
They just don't see it your way.
Right.
But touch them by their avodah zarah. You're thinking in terms of your avodah zarah, how it fits on them. But touch them by their avodah zarah and they go down hard.
Right. I hear what you're saying. Right. Meaning, so if I'm looking at it from my worldview, whatever it is, right? I said to someone that I have a very low tolerance right? The very low tolerance for discomfort. If something's off, then I want to know right away, why is it off? Why should I feel this way? I don't, why should life be so difficult? There has to be some way
to get
out.
relief.
Right. But then, I don't know if get relief is the right word, but sometimes looking at it and saying, like, why is it this way? Like, why should I be this way? Why should I feel this way? Why should I feel tired? Why should I feel unhappy? Why should I feel anxiety? Why should I feel any of these things? Let me see if there's better. Let me see if there's more. Let me see if there's a way out. Then you watch someone else who's struggling, who's suffering, and you say, like, just knock on this door. Like, knock on it. See, maybe there's an answer. But it's like, no, persistent, head down. And I'm like, why are you willing to suffer so much?
Well, there could be multiple reasons. Sometimes they're out of fuel. And so even though they only have to drive around the corner, they can't. This is it. They've hit their limits. Sometimes they don't have the intelligence or the resources. Or people build confidence over time. So if you've been successful in life, you believe that you can solve your problems. But if you haven't been successful, at some point you start believing that you can't solve your problems. Right, and so why you even waste your energy? So there's a lot that goes into that.
Right. But you're saying also touch them where it hurts by them and they'll collapse quickly.
Or they're already collapsed. Just because they're walking around doesn't mean that they're really there. Being there means that they have a desire to be there. Not that they're numbing themselves and distracting themselves and trying to survive. That's not being there. That's just a placeholder.
Right. So you're using that as evidence of the fact that we're weaker in some way, which I understand what you mean by that.
Mentally, emotionally, this is all it's about. You know what Avram Avinu and Nimrod had?
Go ahead.
That we don't have? They had absolute and complete confidence in their understanding of reality. And they were fully present in every organ, and they knew how to access each one. They knew how to animate every type of God, every type of divinity, anything that exists. Both of them knew that. Nimrod, it says, Yoda es riboinoi mechav Nimrod boy. He knows his master, and he intends on rebelling against him. And so they were fully alive. They knew how they operate. Once we've forgotten how we operate, we've been violating ourselves constantly, worse and worse. And so it's not possible that anything gets better. It's not how it works. The Gemara says, since the day of the destruction of the temple, every day, there isn't a day that doesn't have a bigger curse than the day before. And so you're talking thousands of years. There are many, many curses. A curse means a destruction of the natural pathways of life. A blessing means an enhancement to the natural pathways of life. And a curse means there's destruction to the natural pathways of life. And so it's not possible that anything got better. No, nothing can get better. The goal here is that it gets bad enough for people to stop what they're doing. This is where it needs to go.
But individual lives get better. I feel like my life is better than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Yes, because you've been doing your work. And therefore, the curse doesn't affect you the same way. The environment is still cursed. It's not like the world has changed. It's just that you've learned how to carry it better. You've made a bigger commitment to being you. And congratulations. That's a wonderful thing. That's what we all should do. Eventually, all of us are going to be committed to healing humanity, and then humanity is going to heal. But until then...
But the curse is bigger than ever, you're saying. The world is in a worse state than it's ever been.
Yeah, that's very clear.
It's a fairly hopeless message.
No, I think this is the hope. If we have the biggest curse, and here we are, imagine how much better it can get. We didn't change the status, right? Your life is the same life. So I didn't take anything from you. I didn't make you feel any worse. I'm just giving you context, saying this is terrible. So right. That's not a bad thing.
What I'm saying is it's the hopelessness is that you're saying tomorrow is guaranteed to be worse.
Not for you individually, but for the world, yes, until there's going to be a huge shift. That's the goal. So otherwise we would say that all this curse was wasted. If suddenly there's just going to be relief and then we can go back to our old ways, then we wasted all this suffering. The Holocaust came for nothing. But no, this is building until we're going to break. We need to break.
Collectively.
Collectively, we need to realize that we are rebelling against the source. And this is known everywhere. All the heavens, all the angels, all the stars, everyone knows that this earth, this planet, is rebelling against the source. It's very clear. And we have to realize this and realize that this is why we are suffering. And so mental health, emotional health, they're all going to deteriorate until we change. And this is what's good for humanity.
And what is that? It sounds like a maggid. You know, they say like the preachers used to come to town.
Musar.
Yeah.
He's giving you the heavy message.
Yeah.
Well, I think the world is telling us this heavy message so loudly that you can't hide anymore. We shouldn't try to hide. There's so much suffering going on. There's so many people that are getting traumatized now as we speak. There's war, you know. Whether it's the people that are being displaced, whether it's the soldiers, whether it's the people just hearing a siren and going to hide it. Just having to face that type of misery is extremely painful. And I think that the world is giving us this message. And so expressing it and giving it more detail could be helpful so people can understand what is happening. Otherwise, it seems meaningless. It seems cruel. It seems like we're trying to do our best here and this is what we're getting. But no, this is not our best. We're very far from our best. Something is fundamentally wrong with how we see the picture.
Right. So you're trying to find a much deeper meaning, message, and purpose in all the chaos and destruction going on.
Yes, but at the same time, this was already foretold thousands of years ago. And so it's not like this just came out of the blue. This was the message the entire time. Judaism has a rough message. It's not Buddhism. It's not here to be silent and stand aside and leave the world and never come back. It's here to get involved in the world and to repair what's broken. And something is very, very broken. And so we have to find that brokenness. And we came into it. It's not a message of blame on any individual. We came into a broken world.
But there's a message. Where does it say? It says that if Mashiach doesn't come in our days, in someone's time, exactly.
But this is related to the curse. It means once the soul is not here, life is not life. And so if you didn't experience it while you were alive, then the life was passed without soul.
But it suggests that we have the capability to do something about it.
Absolutely. We're the only ones. The only time anything will take place that will change the destiny of man is here and now. That's the only place it can happen. And so Judaism has been carrying its message from the past to the future, but really it wants to penetrate the now. That's what it's trying to do for so many years, and we have to let it in. If to us Judaism is something theoretical that lives in some heaven somewhere that we're imagining, then we're totally missing the point. The point is here and now.
But then so did many of these greats that you're mentioning. Not that they necessarily missed the point for themselves. They could have had an individual revelation or whatever else, but they certainly missed the point of getting the message to everyone else.
Well, we don't know yet. I think only in hindsight, after liberation, when we will see the context of what actually took place, we will be able to say who helped and who hurt. And I'm sure that there are going to be surprising names on both sides. But from our perspective now, we can't yet know what the goal is in order to say, oh, this didn't help any. How do we know? Maybe it did. Chabad spread all around the globe. You know, there's Judaism everywhere. And so we don't know how instrumental that's going to be in the final move. You know, this is a setup. And it's been set up over a very long period of time. Only when we will see it play out, we will be able to say, oh, this was this part of the puzzle, and this was that was the part, and this is such an important integral part, and this was so meaningful. And this guy moved us backward a bit, and this guy moved us forward, and this guy had such great intentions, and yet he said it so wrong, and this guy didn't even know what he was saying, and yet he said it so right, and all this will only become revealed later.
But you do feel fairly certain about several people in history.
Yes. For me, this is from my experience, that these people liberated my soul. And so when I read their words, there's something there that resonates beyond the intellect. There's something there that's like feeling this nostalgic feeling of missing home. You know, my soul wants to be home, wants to feel safe. It wants to know the intention of this mission so that it's sure that it's not failing somehow or even worse, causing damage.
But knowing that you know so little, how do you know?
Well, the
Knowing
evolution,
that you have so little of the full picture.
the evolution
How does one know?
of your own soul happens in your organs. And so even if it's completely wrong, it will have to play out within my organs in order for me to know that. And so the way forward is through dedication and taking it so seriously that I'm never distracted from where I'm trying to go. But on the way, I'm going to go down many different paths, and some of them are going to be directly influential and help me get to the next level, and some of them are going to mislead me, and then I'm going to retract and find another path, and that's just the nature of it. But it has to happen in my organs. And so for me, my organs are loud enough already that I have a message. And so therefore I'm speaking out and I'm saying, I'm listening to something. Something is telling me something that seems to be very meaningful. And it's connecting many dots. To others, this information might ring entirely differently. Their organs might react differently and it might lead them down a very different path. But if I gave them the appetite to search, then this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Then I got my reward already. Where it leads them to, what their organs are going to say, and how they're going to evolve, that's between him and his source. That's between him and the ultimate source, the one who designed him, the one who created him. That's the one that he has to answer to, not to me or to anyone else.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that as you're seeking truth, you'll know it from the inside out. Like it'll start resonating within you.
That's the only way to know.
Things will start turning online.
I've realized enough to know that I'm aligned somewhat with the truth. Because, for example, when I was learning Reb Tzaddik, after learning Reb Tzaddik for a little while, even though I haven't gone through all his svarim, I could already come up with chidushim that eventually I would find that he actually wrote. My mind would start to think along those patterns. And so the same happened with many different svarim. And like with the Zohar itself even, I could realize things the Zohar should say that eventually I found he actually says. And so that tells me that my mind is not off completely.
Right.
I'm sure that it's off on many different details, and this is a work in progress. As I keep learning and as I keep working out what I've discovered, and mostly refuting the way that it was told to me so that I can really digest it, so that it can make sense to me in a real way, in a way that's here and now. So the more I do that, the more the picture, the puzzle is coming together, the more different parts are starting to make sense. But this is a process that takes forever. This is a process that never ends.
But you know you were further away from it earlier in life because
There's no question. There's no question. Just the appetite that I've gained, just the desire that I have for it, that alone is giving witness
right.
to the
It's
change.
more online than it is offline.
It wants it right. now more than ever. And that's
in some way more engaged with life itself.
For sure. In every way, but not in the external life, not where people are at. Where people are at doesn't interest me anymore. I don't have patience for it. But the things that matter are becoming more and more meaningful, and they are animating me. They are moving me. They are making me do things and say things that I never thought of before. And so this is my proof. This is how I live it.
Your message now feels more urgent than last year. Yes. What changed?
I'm healing. But I think also the world is changing. I think the suffering is more pronounced. And it feels like to me that there's an urgency, there's an impatience from the spiritual side with humanity. That we are really not getting it. We're really not focusing our energy the way that we were designed to do. And so the world feels different to me now.
Than it did a year ago.
Yeah.
You're living in Israel, right?
That's right.
Is some of that as a result of October 7th and what's happened in Israel since?
Definitely. And it's not just what happened. That was just the opening scene. But there's been an instability. There's been a lack of calm. There's been a lot of violence against us and even coming from our side. And this means that the collective soul is not peaceful. This means that the source is changing the status quo with humanity. And as long as the conflict resolution is going to be externally based, what do you give to me, what do I give to you, or, then we're not really going to solve anything. We might get a few days of peace, a few months of peace, a few years of peace, but this is no solution to anything. Something in the way that we perceive reality needs to be different. We need to awaken more soul. And if the soul were to awaken, then the nations will get along. What we're fighting over is a lack of soul. It's not really about beliefs, because these people were born into it. The people fighting don't have such depth that they would fight over beliefs. They are people who are simple people. They are practical people. They are externally based.
You're saying on both sides?
On all sides.
Right.
These are not the types of people who would fight over ideology. They are not these deep thinkers that have very worked out philosophical views. You know? This is not what's driving them.
So what is? It's kind of team blue, team red.
What's driving them is that the world is no longer united at its core. The soul of the world is impatient. Something is restless. And so the external forces feel that, and they take that in their own way. This allows for the other side, the side that doesn't like humanity, to awaken within humanity and wreak havoc. But it's not coming from a holy place. This is not a holy war. It's not coming from the soul. It's not coming from a deep commitment to reality. It's a tit-for-tat game. It's about power. It's about rulership. It's about racism. It's about ethnicities. It's about ancient wars between families that are still deeply ingrained in the minds of the people. But when the soul awakens, we will realize that we all have the same soul.
Jew and non-Jew.
Jews, Christians, and Muslims specifically. The rest of the world as well, because it's one soul. But Jews, Christians, and Muslims have the same soul.
You're saying it's coming from Avram.
It's coming from Avram. It's coming from Moshe. It's coming from the same tradition, meaning they believe that all the prophets that we claim were prophets.
Right.
And so that's enough to build something on. That's much more than we argue over. We argue that a couple of people that they claim are prophets were not. But all the prophets we claim are prophets, they say, you're right, they were. They represented the real...
Right, but it doesn't go the other way. That all the prophets we claim are prophet, that all the prophets they claim are prophets, we claim are prophets too.
It depends on how you define a prophet. If you define a prophet as someone who came with a message to the world, then you would be right. But if you define a prophet as someone who came with a message to the world that is accurate to the final liberation, then that wouldn't be the case. These were prophets of exile. Meaning, they were a revelation of the king, but the king wasn't in his palace. And so you don't find the actual kingdom there. This was a fleeting moment that this is what the world needed. And therefore, whoever was in charge was in charge. And so the revelations that came were revelations that were meaningful to the world and affected humanity in a very deep way. But they are not loyal to the final liberation. When the final liberation comes, those messages will somehow be revealed to have been a preparation. Even our message is a preparation, but in our preparation, the meal is already included. In their preparation, the wisdom itself is no longer there. And this relates to the wisdom of the Sefer Yetzirah, the 32 paths of wisdom, that is the root of the Torah, is the root of all the teachings. And these 32 paths relate to the body and the forces that animate the body, that together are called the Tzelem Elohim. And this is the form of all the worlds. There's nowhere that you will find yourself, even after 120, even after 1,000 years, even after 1,000,000 years. There's nowhere that you're going to find yourself that is not designed by the Tzelem Elohim, by the 32 forces, or 32 aspects of one force.
What's 32?
32 is the Lamed Beis Nesivos HaChochma. It's 10 letters, 10 vowels, and 22 letters. This is the combination of the forces. The 10 relate to soul. The 22 relate to the vessels of soul. And this is the animation of the entire thing. And so anything I'm telling you now is a result of the animation of the 32 that are animating me in order to say this. And so who is saying it? If you're thinking like a Greek, you say, what do you mean? I'm saying it. But if you're thinking like an Egyptian, you say, who is saying it? His desire to spread wisdom is saying it. And so it's not me. I'm being animated by something else. Because I'm just the collection of all these potential forces. When the force acts, we recognize the force as what it is.
And if one is thinking like a Jew?
If
you said if you're thinking like a Greek.
If one is thinking like a Jew, then he says it's the one, the unity, that is animating the 32 forces. This is how I said that Judaism is very closely related to idol worship. The only difference is, what's the point of worship? But the forces, and so this is why I say that Hinduism is much closer to Judaism than Buddhism. Buddhism is a much younger religion. Buddhism doesn't have the language of the 32 forces at all. In Hinduism, it's not 32 forces. They have their own way of how they interact with the body. But it's a much closer variation because they're actually trying to teach you the wisdom within you and getting to know the divinities that are animating you and who do you need to please in order to be a better you.
Okay, so I want to go back again to something you said and then bring it back to the practical. So when you're talking about in the solution to the current problems, and I guess we were focused a lot on what's going on in Israel, being that you live there. You mentioned that when we recognize we have a soul and that we're all one soul, especially Jews, Muslims, and Christians, it's well known that, I don't know, throughout Judaism, but certainly in the Tanya, it makes a distinction between the Jewish soul and the non-Jewish soul. How do you understand that as it relates to?
Judaism has been built on two sides. One is the seed, which is they have very specific practices on how to create seed, which is the essence of man. And the other is the teachings, which is the wisdom that's supposed to protect the seed. Now, the special seed had three variations. The seed was originally contaminated by Adam Rishon. The seed was then cleansed by Noach. All the variations of seed were discarded, and Noach's seed was kept. And then there was Shem Cham Yofes, and going through again a process of clearing the seed from whatever went wrong originally. And so the Jewish seed went through three filters.
You mentioned two. The third would be Moshe?
Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov.
Oh, okay, that's it again. Fine.
The Jewish seed is after Bnei Noach. The Bnei Noach is everyone, right? So that's not necessarily Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. Right. That's the whole world.
Right.
They're all Bnei Noach. But the Muslim goes through one filter. The Christian goes through two filters. The Jew goes through three filters. Because Avram, you get Yishmael.
Right.
So he went through one. Yitzchak, you get Esav. He went through two.
Right.
The Shvatim of Yaakov, they went through three. And these are called Avos Olam. These were the people who knew how to make seed. They had the full wisdom. They understood the proper intention. Reuven, Shimon, Levi is already variations of seed, like we had before. There's the Baal Shem Tov, and there's all the offshoots. Right. There's Yaakov, and there's all the offshoots. And so they don't anymore know what Yaakov knew. And so Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov are Ovis. That's it. No one else. We don't say Reuven Uvinu, even if you're from his Shevet.
Right.
And so the Ovis are the ones who know how to be a father because they know the proper intention, because that intention is what's going to drive the child. That's the soul of the child. And so the more that intention is aligned with the intention of the Creator when He created life, the more that person is a real person. The more the intention is, oh, I just want to have pleasure, I hope no child comes of it, that person is not a real person. Because what type of soul is that? The parents don't want the child to happen. That's not a... And so the intention of the fathers is what creates the seed. And so on the side of the seed, there's a difference between the seed that has been kept and protected for all these generations and the seed that has been neglected and there was no specific intention for all these generations. It's a different species by now. Even though from the external we might see it as the same species, on the soul level it's a different species. What's driving it, what's living inside of it is something else.
Better?
More aligned with reality, which is the only way of measuring better. What else could be better? This will result also in
so when you're saying
suffering.
It's the same soul, because now you say same soul, different soul.
It's the same soul because the essence of the teachings and the essence of the message that we're trying to live is the same. And yet, because it evolved over so many generations with the proper intention in a specific seed, that means that within that soul, this is now an entirely different species. Just like the world has one soul. And yet the animals, we wouldn't say they completely share a soul with humanity, even though they do to a certain degree. And so we can share a soul and still be an entirely different species of soul.
Okay, so maybe as we make it practical, I'll see if I still have a question. So now bring it back to what you see as the solution, because if the purpose is unity, then obviously there's massive disunity, right? Specifically in Israel. Really, not only when you look at the Jews and non-Jews, right? The Israelis and the Palestinians, also within the Jews itself, there's a tremendous amount of disunity. So what do you see as the way out? If there was a collective wake-up call that many of us heeded, what is the message that you feel we would get?
The Baal Shem Tov was known to be the soul of Mashiach. And his message was, like we said before, we need to learn wisdom so that we can heal our hearts. And so only when people will start looking at life from the perspective of wisdom will they suddenly change their desires and the way they interact with the world. If they don't realize the consequences, then why would they change? Nothing's going to change by external force. Nothing is going to change by anyone's command. It's going to change because the organs are going to be aligned differently, because the balance between the priorities are going to change. And so wisdom is the answer. The Zohar says clearly, through this Sefer, we're going to leave the Golus. As long as we're not learning the Zohar, we're not leaving the Golus. How are you possibly going to leave the Golus? Who is going to come and who's going to liberate you if you're not trying to heal your own heart? And so the context of liberation is an internal shift. It's a change in consciousness. It's a change in how we see the world, reality, our bodies, our souls. This comes back to what we said before. Certain parts of ourselves have been exiled. If we want to heal, we have to bring them back from exile. We have to realize what we are offending. We have to realize how we see life wrong. What was the real intention?
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is that when collectively there's a shift inward, and say that the problem that we're experiencing, whatever it is, right? One person says, I have this person on my border doing this, or I have that person on the other side of the fence doing that, or I have someone posting something in support of this group or that group, and these are offending me in some way. The moment that collectively we start looking inward for the solutions, then we're on the right path.
Yes.
That's right.
But looking inward in the beginning means reading the right books and learning the right sugya, the right subject, in order to understand what is really the message. We're doing things, we're trying to connect it, we're trying to be better, but there's something fundamentally wrong with how we are understanding what's happening here. We're taking things for granted, we're making assumptions, and it's not so. This is not the intention, this is not how it was meant to be. Once the organs learn certain patterns in young age, it's the most natural for us to continue doing what we're doing until our brain just keeps confirming to us that we are right, even though it doesn't really have a solid base other than what it used to think as a child in order to base that decision on. And so essentially we're being run by children. We need the adults to wake up. We need people to look at things and to really face reality. Reality is difficult to face, but when we face it, we get the ultimate relief. This is what he wants for us, the one that designed us. He wants us to listen to the reactions of the organs that he created in order to know our way. And if we think we can get our way from any other place, then there's going to be a heavy price for that, because it's violating our design. It's violating his intention for how we are.
So make it more specific, because if I'm thinking of the way someone listening to this may react, and I recognize, like you said, that everyone will receive a message,
of course,
slightly differently. So maybe it's the way I'm receiving it, is that I feel the passion, I feel the urgency, but I'm not clear necessarily on what your idea or guidance or advice is.
My advice is to search for wisdom so that we can learn. I can't tell you to learn Zohar. I don't know if you have the capacity to learn Zohar. So maybe you need to learn Chassidus. Maybe you need to learn Baal Shem Tov. Maybe you need to learn Chabad. Maybe you need to learn Reb Tzadok.
What about for the rest of the world?
People are not ready to learn.
Yes.
They need to focus on their emotional health and their relationships and interactions to not be a source of damage, but also not a source of misrepresenting things, misrepresenting what they know, misrepresenting their level of understanding, or to realize the seriousness of what's taking place over here, because everything is so consequential. Like, if we pretend to our children like we know more than we do because we want them to listen to us, it's going to mean that they're going to rely on what we tell them more than they should. And so therefore they're going to be misled. And so if I'm not the guy that knows how to learn, and I'm not going to go to the bottom of things, I need to at least be honest enough about that to declare that I don't really know about these things. I don't really understand them. I do what feels safest, but I can't know if I'm right or if I'm wrong. And something needs to shift in how we see the magnitude of that knowledge, of that decision-making process, of who do I trust? What do I really do? People take it too lightly. This rabbi is in my neighborhood. I daven in his shul. He says nice things. And this is your soul we're talking about. He might be destroying your soul. He might be putting you in conflict with the source, and you're only going to know it, who knows when, maybe after you leave the body. And so we need to understand the importance of these things. If you don't know, you better follow someone that really does know, and how are you going to know who to follow?
Right. I'm wondering, someone listening to this, someone listening to our conversation?
Yes.
How do they know? Right, you're posing a lot of questions.
Right.
So as long as we left with that question and say, how do I know that this is not disconnecting me from my soul?
Right. And so the answer is, take it seriously.
Take it seriously that it could be.
Take it seriously that whatever is happening when someone is talking to you about Judaism, about God, about religion, about rabbis, about whatever, something that's related to your soul, he might be causing you tremendous gain, or he might be causing you tremendous damage. Take it very seriously. What you should do, you have to ask your organs. If you're asking my organs, then we're back to square one.
Right. Okay, so your message that it really matters. Everything really matters.
The seriousness of this conversation needs to be elevated. It needs to be more important than anything that can happen outside of you, because this is the real deal. This is the long-term contract with the infinite. This is where you go after. You don't have to worry about money. You don't have to worry about relationships. You go all alone to a place where only this is going to matter.
You're saying both me as a speaker, you as a speaker, and then someone listening as well.
Everyone that's
participating.
Everyone that's alive has this process happening through them, and they don't take it seriously enough. They waste it. This is very, very long term. The commitments that we make through every word is eternal. And so we need to give a lot more weight. So if someone could learn wisdom, then by all means, dig into it. If you're not capable of learning wisdom, be very careful and be very honest with yourself and give it the right level of importance. Because otherwise, you're for sure going to get it wrong. And then you're going to complain that no one told you.
So how do you, when you look back at yourself, let's say from a year ago, do you see yourself as someone who was getting it wrong? And if not, why not? How not?
I'm always getting it wrong. And I'm never taking it seriously enough. And yet, I really give it all I got. I'm not doing anything else. But the more I see what's really happening, the more I realize that, wow, what a fool I was. I can't go fast enough. It's like my body has gotten used to certain patterns, and it takes years to rebuild whatever. I was busy with money. This was my concern. I was afraid of not having. I was afraid of not being able to pay the rent. And this consumed all of me. This was probably my biggest fear, at least in the conscious mind. Behind, I had bigger fears, and I think some of them very religious. And this is what was really happening on the back burner the whole time. But consciously, most of my time, most of my energy was spent trying to make a living and trying to protect whatever it was that I needed to protect in the financial jungle that we live in. And so now to learn how to go into that subtle world where no one is really after you, you have all the time in the world, no one's trying to cheat you or hurt you or steal from you, but you need to remember what you really want. You need to remember how to come to life over there and how to direct yourself in order to understand what is bothering your soul. And so in that world, I became a stranger. And now it's been years that I've been trying to become reacquainted with that world.
The inner world.
The inner world. What's really driving me. Let's say I have enough money and I don't need to work. What then? This happened to be what came. After I became more concerned about wisdom than I did about money, I no longer needed to spend as much time dealing with money. Somehow my circumstances shifted. But first came a burning desire to know more truth. And how could it be that life is like this? It makes no sense. I don't see any reason why anyone would invest these resources to make something like this. Like, what could he possibly gain out of this? What does he want?
Out of?
This creation. This world, this species, yeah. Why? What's his interest over here? What does he have to gain? What does he want? Because I'd gladly give it to him. I got nothing better to do.
So, but that's still a question for you, not.
So that led me to wisdom, and I know that he wants me to be wise because I see how he designed it. Kulam b'chachma sisa. Everything here is with wisdom. Everything is relationships. Everything is formulas. Everything is somehow related to everything. This is wisdom that's talking, and we need to tune into that vibration. And that can feed our soul. Wisdom gives life to one who owns it. And so my goal is to awaken a desire for wisdom. This is my practical advice. This is as practical as it gets for me.
So you feel like most of us are missing the mark, is that we just don't care.
Yeah. You don't even realize how important it is to care. We don't even realize what type of trouble he went through, the level of detail. He could have made us round like an egg with 2 penguin feet, and we would have been just fine, but that's not what he did. There's an entire language here to every organ, to its function, to its color, to its shape, to its location. Everything is talking. Everything is saying meaningful things. We're supposed to be in constant awe, but not the awe that makes us run in fear, the type of awe that gives us a desire for it, an appetite for life. We've lost our appetite for it. And so there's something that we all need and we all have the potential for, and it's not here now. And when we'll have it, we'll be like, oh, that's what I was missing. I get it now.
Right. And you feel like we're just distracting ourselves with more and more.
This is the way of the Gentiles. We've fallen to their ways, which is, let me just be comfortable now. Who cares about the big picture? We'll worry about it when it hits us.
What do you mean by that, the way of the Gentiles?
The Goyim, the 70 nations from the beginning, their power was the power of distraction.
Say more.
What happened before the flood was that the soul was no longer healthy, but the body was quite healthy. They never suffered. They were never sick. They never had a headache.
They lived for very long times.
They lived very long. They really liked living. But the soul was suffering. It was deteriorating. And so they followed the bodies all the way. And so came the flood because of corruption.
They followed the bodies all the way.
And that caused corruption. It meant that people were not behaving in accordance to the design, but they were doing things that were violating the design, that were even more offensive to the soul. More and more soul was leaving.
I mean, symbolically, there was a tower that they were building to...
This was after the flood, right?
Oh, that was after the...
Dera Floga.
Okay.
So what led to the flood was a lack of soul, and the body was dominating. And so everything external was driving, and the internal was neglected. And so then came the flood. After the flood, 10 generations, this is when the tower happened. And the tower, the goal of the tower was they could no longer leave the people to their own devices. They couldn't let the people decide their own destiny, because it would very quickly devolve back to what it was before the flood. So they needed structure. They needed to create some type of order. And the question was, what do you do about the nature of the people? The nature of the people is not going to be happy if you give them order. Why would anyone want to do anything less than what they feel like doing that very moment?
Right.
The answer to that was distraction. We're going to make them have to work so much. We're going to make them be so busy. We're going to make them whatever, that they won't have time to think about their nature or to know it. And therefore they won't have any questions.
Right. And that's still the way most of us live.
It got much worse.
But
no one ever dreamed of this.
Right.
No one ever assumed that 24/7 you're going to be looking at gadgets and being busy with running after things and flying at unnatural speeds around roads. That no one ever imagined that humanity is going to be so insane. We really outdid ourselves there.
But here we are. You flew around the world for these gadgets, people watching gadgets.
Exactly.
Right.
So this went really crazy. But the original idea was distraction. But Avraham Avinu said, if you distract them, you're tying them to the physical even more. How is the soul ever going to awaken?
So what was his answer?
His answer was, we're going to distract them, but we're going to distract them through wisdom. And then, if they will listen to the very wisdom that's distracting them, they will rediscover the soul. And then they won't have to be distracted any longer.
And how will that process happen?
This is what Mashiach is going to finish. Moshe Rabbeinu started it. He ingrained the distraction after the Egel. And Mashiach is going to...
The distraction being?
The Torah, the mitzvahs, the whole story.
Oh, it's a different level of distraction.
It's a distraction that carries within it the truth. And so it's a distraction that has the wisdom that can awaken the soul. It's not a random distraction. We're not going to a movie just to see something random. We're not going to read a book.
But you're saying it can also become a distraction very quickly.
It is very much a distraction.
Right. We can be very, very busy with a lot.
And not only that, as humanity evolved and the power of speech became more and more developed, we needed more and more distractions. So then we had the Mishnah, and then we had the Gemara. The Gemara is a huge distraction. Think about a person trying to know the Torah when he is learning the Chamisha Chimshe Torah, maybe even all the Sifra Nevim and the Ksivim, right? You can go through the whole Torah in less than a week. And now you have the Gemara. How long will it take you to go through the whole Torah? At least a year.
Right.
And then the amount of information and the different types of thinking that are involved and the different sugis that are spread all over, pieces here and pieces there to put all that together. It's a lifetime.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime.
Or more.
And so they did that on purpose, of course. There was no mistakes. They knew what they were doing. And the understanding was humanity's been overrun by the demonic and they're a danger to themselves. They need to be distracted in order to survive. And so Nimrod starts this process of distraction. And he does it as a rebellion against our nature. He knows what he's doing. He's not doing it because he wants something. He's doing it specifically for the sake of making everyone subordinate to him. And so he declares himself a god. He says, God created you for whatever purpose, who cares? Now this is what you're going to do for me.
Which was?
Build my city, build
Right.
my tower, sell my gods, Terach with his store, where he was selling the different symbols and the different expressions that they would bow to in order to awaken different divinities, different forces within man. And these were very wise people. They knew what they were doing, but it wasn't in line with the intention of the Creator that created us. We have a very specific destiny, and we can only thrive when we are accurate to our destiny.
So you've referred to learning, right, various Sfarim books, both as distraction and as the search for wisdom, which is the purpose of it all.
The search for wisdom is only in the Kabbalah. Everything pshat is first and foremost a distraction. If you know the Kabbalah, then the pshat becomes wisdom. But until then, it's just a distraction.
I hear you.
It actually says that in the Zohar, in such a lashon. It says, you know, in Egypt they were building the cities, Pisam Ramses, and it says over there, Pari says, Tichbado avoido, let the work be heavier, val yishu b'divrei shoker. They shouldn't be busy with. They were asking, we want to go worship
Right.
the big God, and he says, okay, I know what that means. You're not distracted enough. Work harder.
Right.
And so it says there the pasuk vayemaru es chayim b'chomer v'ulveinim. Right? They made their lives bitter through cement and bricks. And so the Zohar says vayemaru es chayim b'chomer du kal v'chomer ibilveinim du liben hilchasa, meaning whatever they gave you to do in the Gemara, which is to try to do a kal v'chomer, to try to understand different things, or to try to understand the halacha. We're going to tell it to you vaguely. We're going to tell it to you in 6 different ways, in 6 different places, and you're going to have to figure out what we really mean. This is identical to what happened in Egypt when Vaymaris Chayim B'Chaim Ulevenim. There they did it through cement and bricks. Here they're doing it through giving you texts over texts over texts, and you go and collect different pieces and try to build something out of that.
Oh, it's intentional.
Of course.
Oh, sometimes I wondered, you're reading a Gemara, arguing for pages and pages and pages about what two Tanaim meant. Like, you just could have said it. You're so smart.
The goal is to build vessels. The goal is to build connections between your neurons. It wants to fire those synapses. It's not about the information per se. The information is only going to become relevant if the wisdom lives in you. And then suddenly the vessels are going to work in your favor. And so if we're teaching you how to analyze data, how to recognize arguments, how to question arguments, you're supposed to apply these skills in the actual life and ask and question what you were told to believe.
And for all these years this didn't exist, you're saying that we didn't need as much distraction.
The distraction grew as the necessity grew. The more people were disturbed, the more they needed distraction. Otherwise they would crash. And so what the distraction does today for people is it allows them to run ahead of their demons, which are chasing them. If they will not be distracted, their demons will catch them. It's not going to be pretty.
Right, which essentially is sitting down quietly in a room by yourself.
Yeah. Suddenly emotions and feelings and questions and thoughts and urges and compulsions, they're all going to come to the surface.
Right.
Because it's not that he was okay. It's that he had techniques of how to get away from himself.
Yes. I've been thinking about, I don't know if I would use such strong language as thinking about doing a darkness retreat, but I've been thinking about doing it.
Okay.
And you know what they are, right? Sitting in complete darkness for 3 or 4 days.
Right. They say that it activates the pineal gland or something like that.
I think it probably activates a lot of stuff.
Okay.
But just the thought, right? It's terrifying. And why is it so terrifying?
Because sitting there just with yourself
It's scary, yeah.
is very scary. You are not happy with reality, nor should you be. The question is, how accurate are you with your unhappiness? This is what differentiates between a healthy soul and an unhealthy soul. No one should be happy here. Yeah, tzaddikim would sit at night and they would cry over Galus Hashchina, over the destruction of the temple and the fact that there is no revelation that we can access, which means we don't really know the truth. And so these were the people who were the most connected to the highest and most joyous, pleasurable levels. And yet, because they are here and they see the calamity, they cry. And so they're crying and they're crying. One is crying he doesn't have money. The other one is crying because humans are in suffering. And so that's the distinction between the healthy soul and the unhealthy soul, not the happy one. The happy one is a fool.
I hear it. And obviously, if you're saying that everything matters, right, and that you're doing this very specifically and intentionally, you're speaking here, you're speaking out in general, that means, I guess, you believe your words won't fall on deaf ears in some way, that hopefully enough people will listen to you and it'll make a difference.
I have 2 ears that are always activated. And so when my ears hear what I say, it motivates me even more. So then I already got something done. Whoever else wants to jump on the bandwagon and get motivated, by all means. I don't know where it's going to lead. I have no guarantees from anyone. I'm not working for a boss. And so I can't really come with any arguments if nothing comes of it. But at the same time, like we said before, every word is meaningful. I'm attaching myself to something that I feel is very real and very big and very important to me.
But what's the need to talk about it?
I believe that humanity is suffering as a result of not knowing this.
That means you believe it's going to do something.
I believe it can. I don't know that people will listen. I believe that if people will listen, it will change their lives, no question.
Has anyone listened?
I think so.
I've
gotten a lot of feedback of people who say that it made a big difference for them. I don't know to what degree, but...
Enough to keep going.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to keep going. I keep shifting and changing what I do and how I do, and I have different projects that I'm trying, maybe in writing, maybe in speaking, maybe this or maybe that, and I'm open, to wherever this is going to lead. But it's important enough to me that it's the primary thing that I'm doing with my life. And so wherever it goes, I don't know.
So the change between you last year and this year is primarily internal, or just you, the same person, listening to the external messages that are changing? Which would you
no,
attribute
I'm
to?
not the same person internally at all. I'm very, very different. In my personal life, there's been a lot of changes and shifts, and I'm coming out from a very deep place of suffering where I couldn't continue. I was done with life. And
Recently, or?
No, this goes back about a decade.
Right. We spoke about some of that.
Yeah, and something shifted over there. And then in my personal life, many things happened. And 3 years ago...
That more recently?
Yeah, 3 years ago I got divorced. And that was a big deal for me. And I still haven't fully healed. Like, it's only now that it's dawning on me, the fact that, I'm divorced. You see, your life has changed. You should start thinking about what you want to do with it. That's been the last couple of months that's been waking up in me. But until now, there wasn't even anyone who could have that conversation. I wasn't ready for it. And so things are certainly changing, and I'm healing. And that also means that I'm seeing the world more. Before, I was more in my internal world. It was so chaotic that I had to be busy with it all the time. And now I'm coming down to the surface and I'm seeing a little bit where the world is. And I'm quite surprised. I thought I had left it a little bit more intact. It looks even worse. And so And so that's also influencing how I'm speaking and what I'm saying. Like before, the message was more, life can be better. The unity is a sweet place. We should all try to go there and hang out there more. And now I'm realizing that people are really far from having the tools to even know how to approach anything like that. They need to be shaken, and they need to wake up and realize that something big is taking place, because they're taking it in a context as if everything is almost fine, and everything is very far from fine. And so I feel like this needs to be more emphasized in order for them to see a context of what's being said. Otherwise, you can't really understand the urgency of the message.
So you, who you are today, living in the world that was a year ago, you'd be just as urgent.
I have no way of knowing.
No, that's my question. Meaning, are you... There's one who could just be open to the messages around him, right? Living life, and then saying, obviously, this moment is more urgent than last year, so I have to change my message because...
I'm not sure. It could have been that even if the world didn't change, the change in me would wake that up, because I don't think that the message was less urgent last year.
It was different. Yeah.
No, I'm meaning what I said.
Oh, you mean the message from last year?
I'm saying that if I was in the mind that I have now and I'm speaking
right,
the world was in a terrible place, and the message is just as urgent. Like we said before, the curses are increasing. And so I don't think that from the beginning of the Holocaust until today, the message was any less urgent. Yeah? But would I be in that mindset to speak this way? Would I think that the people can hear it? That's the question. Now it feels like the world came to there. I realized it, but I didn't feel it appropriate. People are so asleep. It's like if you would tell them that things are not good, they would just run. Why would I listen to you? I can just listen to someone who tells me things that just make me feel better. But now I feel like the world is in such a place where, let's not fool ourselves. Something is really wrong, right? So let's just put everything on the table. Let's talk about this.
So a beautiful teaching. I saw it in a book by Nir Manusi, who we had on the podcast. Mm-hmm. It's in his book, I think it's called Becoming One. It's about a marriage. And he talks about, I think it's in the Blessings of Azaysa Bracha, it says something about waking them up like a eagle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I think he says, Rashi says that an eagle, when it comes to wake up its children, it doesn't come right to the nest. It flies, it hovers around the nest, it circles so that the wind from its wings will slowly wake them up.
Very gently.
So it doesn't wake them up so gently. So last year you were flapping the wings, now you're coming to the nest.
I guess so.
So what if we don't, in your opinion, what if we don't hear it? Like it sounds like you're sounding a very strong alarm.
Yeah.
What happens, you think, if it's not heard?
I think that people are already going through some type of a shake-up. And I think this specific wave started with Corona, where things suddenly were not the way that we expected them to be, and things that we thought were eternal suddenly turn out to just not be.
Right.
And so...
The US dollar, for example.
The US dollar or public transportation or being able to breathe the air and feel safe. So something very basic was threatened. And then different things happened, and I think this already took people to a place where they don't have that sense of safety that they used to have.
Right. There's no guarantee that the NBA will be playing basketball next year, for example.
Right.
And that didn't seem like a possibility.
Before that, what do you mean? If money is involved, of course it will happen.
Right.
And so suddenly we realized that money is not everything. There are other things, there are other considerations that might trump money.
Like Trump.
So there you see that the world is not what you thought it was, but people sort of recovered. But then comes another tragedy or another extreme situation or another, and this is slowly building suspense, it's building tension within the nervous system, within the collective nervous system. And so I don't know, I can't assume how things will work out and what will come next. But what we know already is we're never going to be comfortable unless we become the real versions of ourselves that he wants us to be.
Right. What's ironic, though, is that, if someone's trying to send a message, right? By someone, I mean the one, right? Is trying to send a message, and it's consistently missed, then isn't it a little bit cruel just to keep ramping up the pressure if it's not getting heard anyway?
No, because it's not missed. This is what I've been saying, is that this is going to go step by step until we get to a resolution. If I were to say that he will step away now and he'll stop whatever he was trying to do, then it would have been cruel.
It makes everything purposeless.
But he's not going to step away. He's going to have his way. And so therefore, everything that happened leading up to that was actually part of the liberation. It was part of what we were waiting for. We are begging for this in a way. Because if I don't know what's right, let's say you can relate to this. If someone is an addict and he knows he's destroying his life, isn't he waiting for someone to push him hard so that he can, catch himself and realize maybe there's another way? It will take enough pain that he no longer wants to protect himself from the little pains and he wants to face his big pain.
Yes.
So it has to build to a certain threshold. This threshold has to be reached.
Yes. In some way, it's very common for addicts to out themselves.
Yeah. They're looking for someone that will step in.
Yeah. So maybe it's leaving small clues so their spouse or their boss or a close friend realizes how big the problem is. They can't completely out themselves.
Right.
Like, hey, I need this level of help.
Because that's too painful.
But maybe they'll leave their iPad out with, a text message with someone they're having an affair with, and maybe their wife notices, and if she does, then can blow their life up. Or maybe their boss will pass by the computer and realize that
they're taking risks because they no longer know which one is the bigger pain. And so they're leaving it up to chance.
Interesting. So you're saying on some level we're probably calling for the same.
Something is really off. Something that's not supposed to be. We're not seeing what we are, which is a very important component of what's happening, right? It's the second most important component. The most important component is that he knows what's happening. The second most important component is that we know what's happening. Everything else is just details. And there we're failing. We're not only failing by not realizing it and not getting to the end of the maze, we're not even realizing we're in a maze. How long can we go like that?
Right, the darkness of darknesses.
And so he tells us this. He says, if you won't go searching for me, with a strong arm and with an outpouring of rage, I will become king over you. Meaning, I love you too much to just let you get lost. I'm going to bother you. If you don't get it, I'm going to bother you more. Eventually, you're going to wake up. Now, when we look on the individual level, it seems very cruel because how many people have died and they never got to see the liberation that we're looking for? But we have to remember that humanity is a collective creature. We are the cells within a collective creature. Our main disease is that we look at ourselves as individuals. This came when we intellectualized life. This came from the Greeks. This is when they started competition between individuals. Competition between nations started by the Darafloga, by Nimrod. Before that, there was only one. There was only one language. There was only one people. Then came competition.
Wasn't there some competition, right? The first brothers?
There was a competition in the sense of that one didn't feel connected to the higher realms the way that the other one was. So this was something of the essence, that something was different in them that was so meaningful that he couldn't stand it. But what the Greeks did was they caused competition between things that are completely not meaningful. Who can throw in the ball to the hoop? This is not a meaningful pursuit. The only thing that's driving it is the competitiveness of it. You understand? This is what they woke up. Before that, it was nations competing with nations, and individuals would want their nation to win. So let's say David and Goliath. It's not really David and Goliath. Goliath represents the Pelishtim, David represents Klal Yisrael, and so the competition is between the nations, not between the individuals. But then when the Greeks intellectualized life and removed us from the gods, from the forces that are identical within all of us, then suddenly who is the god? the individual became the God. And then we're competing between individuals, and this is burying us. This is really hurting us.
Right. So if someone thinks, and I guess maybe this is where the message kind of drives home for me, if someone thinks that individually they're doing okay, like collectively there's a problem, but individually they're doing okay, then they're disconnected from the
Of
collective.
course, this is like a finger saying, the heart is about to pass out. How's that my problem? I'm a finger. Everything's working. My nerves, everything. Yeah, but soon blood won't be pumping. That's going to be an issue then.
Right. Got it.
So yeah, we really are one being. It's not a theoretical thing. Like the air that's in my brain right now was in your brain just before, and in his brain and in the other man's. It's really that simple. It's one big brain. When we breathe, we're connecting the individual to the collective. And so the collective thinks in all the air. The individual thinks in the air that goes into his brain. And so every time he wants to think, he takes a little drop of the collective, and in that he thinks.
Okay.
And so it's alive. And as a result, we're alive. But it's not I'm alive and you're alive. No. It's alive. And we are feeding off that.
And is it your belief that if just enough Jews get this message right, that the world will be okay?
If one Jew gets the message right, the world will be okay. Meaning, if he can access his heart, if he can go there, like Moshe Rabbeinu, he went there.
But we're not okay.
Because one Jew hasn't.
You said, but Moshe Rabbeinu did.
Moshe Rabbeinu did to the extent of taking them out of Egypt and changing the course of history. And yet he said, I want to go into Eretz Yisrael, which basically means I want to be completely open to reality. And he couldn't go there.
So you're saying he did or he didn't?
He was on the path to going there.
So
he wanted
didn't.
to get to the promised land, but he never made it.
So he didn't?
He didn't.
So no one did?
Not yet. That's the title. The title of Mashiach is for the one who will. But each one that opens...
So what hope is there for us if these, I don't know, Rambam didn't make it, many others, I mean... We can
because
just
it's not about making it, it's about helping it
the
come.
Baal Shem Tov, the Zohar, all the names used, the Arizal.
If you have just one tiny effort that actually makes a difference, then you're made for eternity. Everything that's going to happen after, when the world is perfect, is going to be to your credit. And so even just a tiny slice of it, we've been 2,000 years that we're counting to the Christians, which means that they had the kingdom. They're in charge. You know why? Because when Yaakov stole the brachas from Esav, he dropped 2 tears. He wanted the blessing from Yitzchak. For those 2 tears, he got to run the world for 2,000 years, even though he was completely evil.
Who dropped 2 tears? Esav.
Esav. He got to run the world for 2,000 years because he dropped 2 tears. And so, if someone drops 2 tears because they want the truth to be revealed, what do they get? They get eternity.
Right.
Not 2,000 years. They get 2 tears deep into eternity. That's an eternal depth.
2,000 years is over now.
Yeah. We better get our act together.
We don't know who's next.
No, we
don't know the next person who cried.
We don't know who else cried, but we know that we've cried enough. And something is going to shift. But the point is that anyone that had any hand, anyone that had any energetic influence on the eventual liberation is done. He has nothing to worry about ever, because the world is his. He's a partner in creating the world.
Yes, and if they're still breathing, they got to keep going.
Well, if you can help, help. Otherwise, it would be proving that the real intention was to gain something. Someone who really cares doesn't stop
I got it. Okay, good. I think you've expanded my brain enough for the time being. So let's end with this. Let's define the difference between distraction and the opposite. If everything is distraction, what isn't?
When you do things because your heart has an intention and a desire that's aligned with the greater intention and desire, those things are real. And this is called Ol Malchus Shamayim. This is the burden of the kingdom of heaven. Who's the kingdom of heaven? The one who designed you. And so when you're doing things based on the intention of your designer, and therefore your heart is involved in what you're doing, this is a real doing. This will last forever. The more that is happening, the more whatever you do will be impactful in the world and will stay. Like we see by David HaMelech, when he wanted to create the Beis HaMikdash, his heart was so pure, his intention was so deep, that the Kosel HaMaravi is still standing because he made the foundation for it. But Shlomo, who gave his heart, it lasted for a few hundred years. But it didn't last after that because Shlomo had already distraction. And so he wasn't as real as David on some level. And so his work doesn't last the same way that David's last. This is what it says in the Pasuk, Svas emes tikon la'ad, va'ad argia l'shon shoker. The language of truth lasts forever, and till they calm down, lasts the language of lie, which is the distraction, which means you're using it as a mechanism to get relief, but you don't really care about it. And so therefore, how long will it last? Until you get your relief. You got your relief, you're not interested in any longer. But the truth is not about relief. The truth is about building a world. It's about creating something that is going to be free, that is going to be accurate, that is going to be fully alive. And so everything done with that intention lasts forever. And this goes back to the intention of the seed that we spoke about. This is the intention of the Jewish seed. This is called Kulei Zera Emes. He is all seed that is true. And because the intention of the seed is not, oh, I want to have a child that can serve me in some way, or I hope they look this way or that way, or I just want to have pleasure. No, I'm trying to create something here that's going to become part of the fabric of creation. This is going to give the tree of life a future. And so my intention when I create it is that future. The love that I have for the infinite is being expressed in that specific expression. And that's what gives the seed the power. And so when a seed is Kulei Zera Emes, it means that now there's going to be a future to that seed. There's going to be generations after generations.
And that to you would explain the eternal nature of the Jew.
That's the commitment, that's the bris, that's the bond that we have, the covenant that we have with the beyond. And this is why Yaakov Avinu, it says, Mitasa Shleima, that all his children have this future. By Avraham and Yitzchak, there was something that the intention got lost.
Right.
And now that intention is no longer there. It's no longer alive within them. But within us, we are somehow trying to keep this intention alive. And Yaakov Avinu didn't have any children that he lost. That's why when he lost Yosef, he thought, part of my seed was contaminated. I didn't have the right intention when I made him.
Oh, got it.
And
I understand the brothers also thought that he may have been...
Right, he may have been the Esau or the Ishmael.
Right.
But by Yaakov it says he didn't even have any seed that left his body. He never had a carry. He never had a wet dream. He never had any seed leave his body. That's why he says about Reuven, he says, Koichi v'reishis oini. You're the force that I've kept alive and I've kept it clean until I made you out of it. This is how truthful he was with this process of creation. This is how real it was to him.
Boy, unbelievable. Okay, maybe be like your namesake.
All right. Thank
True
you
to the
much.
process of creation.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Yakov. I enjoyed it again.
Pleasure. Amazing.
And you shook me a little bit, but hopefully I integrated quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll integrate. See, you can do it out here also.
I'll call Danny.
You can do it here in the chair. You don't have to go somewhere and go on a journey. You can just listen to some truth and awaken something real.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.